right, folks, welcome to the Wenner Folsom podcast, your source for battle-tested leadership and resiliency. And we have a great guest today. What do we got, Josh?
Yeah, we actually have another Joshua today. We have Joshua Graner, who's a good buddy of mine, who's also been coaching me. So I'm really excited in this conversation because he is deep in the longevity. And us men, we need longevity. We are dying too young. And so it's a really potent conversation of how to live, like run the marathon, not the sprint, has been my metaphor and my saying. So it's going to be a really value-packed conversation. So just really grateful to have Joshua joining us today. Welcome, Joshua.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Happy to be here.
And hey, I just thought I'd kick us off because I know with your background, I mean, you were 3 years as a paratrooper medic, combat field medicine. You've also spent 25 years working in healthcare, and essentially you burned out. And so you burned out and you learned how to put yourself back together again. And not only have you learned to put yourself back together again, but you also know a lot of the same work that I do from emotional resilience and getting people emotionally regulated. In addition, you do focus work and really all these hacks to be more productive and really allow you to focus. And what I really love is you use data. So like even looking at myself, you were able to say, hey, let's look at the data and the blood work to check your nervous system from a physical function, as well as you took things from my 23andMe and said, hey, let's look at the drivers for your longevity and actually figure out what could happen in the future. And let's prevent it now so that you can live as long as possible and live as full as possible. So I think a lot of guys will get value from this conversation. So just to like kind of jump right into this, where would you say the biggest things you've seen that men are usually lacking of awareness around this conversation?
I would say that the biggest thing, and this is, so what I'm doing now is I primarily work with guys 40 and over. We call it performance enhancement, optimization, all that stuff. But really what we're doing is we're helping to build a solid foundation of health because that's where all performance begins, right? Especially as guys, we want the hack, right? We want to do the thing. We want to kind of like skip the steps and go straight to the high performance, right? So we'll take high performance peptides, or we'll take high performance hormone injections, or we'll take high performance supplements, or we'll do some type of high performance hack workout. But if we don't have the foundation of health, for example, let's just use physical health. Let's use exercise as an example, right? Somebody decides they want to put on 15, 20 pounds of lean mass onto their body, and they start using some gear. They start with some high intensity exercises. They start pushing themselves 6 days per week, maybe sometimes 7. But if their joints, if their tendons and their ligaments aren't ready to receive that degree of load, what's going to happen is after a couple weeks, couple months, maybe 6 months, those elements begin to break down. And now they've got a chronic condition, either in their shoulders, their knees, their ankle, their neck, their wrists, their forearms, their elbow, right? And then what happens? Then they're not able to do the same type of workouts they were doing before. So then they just stop going to the gym altogether, right? So as a way to kind of overreach and try to hit these performance markers, to hit these benchmarks, the foundation wasn't laid first. So as we age, our need changes. I could jump into the gym and beat myself up in my 20s without having much of an effect. I would recover faster. I wouldn't accumulate as many chronic pains and strains, all that stuff, right? And I think the same thing carries forward with in almost every aspect of our life, not just in the physical performance aspect, right? We have to have that solid foundation, and that solid foundation is based on what our specific goals are. And I think that, so I'm using this as an analogy to get to where do I think that most of my clients are really struggling, and including myself and most of the guys that I talk to. Our goals aren't in alignment. For one, a lot of times we're not really clear what our goal is. We're not super clear on that. And our goals aren't really in alignment with our actions, because a lot of times our concept of ourself, our need for validation pushes us to do things further, faster, harder than we really need to do before we actually have that solid foundation set, right? So I had a great conversation with one of my clients yesterday. Basically, he was saying, I would be worth $150 million today, but now I'm only worth 120, and that keeps me up at night. Right. And the mantra that I gave him was like, hey, your net worth is not your self-worth. Right. So as we age, our physiological needs change. And if I compare myself to myself in my 20s, I'm going to drive myself into the ground. Even if I compare myself to myself in my 30s, I'm going to drive myself into the ground. And a lot of that is because in our 20s and in our 30s, the way, especially, adolescence and post-adolescence, the way that our brain is developing is we're very much achievement oriented. It makes sense, right? We have to build. we have to procreate, right? These are prime objectives for our developing brain, for our physiology. It's our hormones, everything else. But as we start to dip over 40, our needs, our physiological needs change, but our psychological needs a lot of times don't catch up to our physiological needs. So now I'm being driven by these programs that were instilled from my adolescence. But, 46, 48, 50, whatever it is, if I'm still being driven by those same drivers, I'm just going to keep on destroying my body. And as a result, I'm also going to be limiting my perspective, my own personal growth, and I'm going to be creating so much internal suffering. You know what I mean? There becomes this friction between what's actually here and what I think I should be doing.
Yeah, speaking my language right now, right? So
Consistency over intensity. That's
100%.
So you started out with the gym and fitness as a practical example, but you're using it as an example also. There's also a metaphor in there.
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing would apply to overreaching or spiritual bypassing, right? Career, relationships, sex life. Like there's a bunch of these things that we jump over to get results before we've established your foundation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, you see this all the time in, self-reports when I'm talking to guys about their sex life. They're healthy sexually, but they don't think that they're healthy sexually because they're not boning like they did back in their 20s. Right. And then as a result, I think that's one of the drivers for a lot of men towards pornography is because, we can get that quick dopamine release. We can get that quick hit when we can curate our specific type of pornographic fantasy, we can get that visual stimulation, right? Because we want to get that quick dopamine hit. So that way we can be sexually engaged 3, 4, 5 times per week, because that puts us back in alignment with how I was 25, 26, 30 years old. Right. I think that's one of the unconscious drivers. It's not just, a lot of people talk about this like, well, the porn industry is evil and it's an addiction and all, there are addictive elements to it. But I think a lot of it, there are physiological drivers. And unless we're aware of what these physiological drivers are, unless we bring them up to our surface, they're still going to be driving us.
You're talking a lot about foundation. It sounds like is the root of that. What would that start to look like of building a solid foundation? Is it both? I'm hearing you saying both understanding where the body's at, and also it sounds like changing the physiological or psychological perspective to match where the body's at and have proper expectations. Is that a big part of what I'm hearing you say?
Huge. Yeah. Yeah. So the key is to assess, don't guess, right? We'll use gym as an analogy. It's like, unless I'm able to assess what my range of motion is, what my strength is, what my cardiovascular fitness is, what my VO2 max is, all these different things, I'm not going to have the ability to really establish effective goals. Right. So for me, always, this comes back from my medical training, but now as a coach, it's the same thing. Get a baseline assessment, right? A lot of times people will take hormone increasing supplements or they'll get on gear. But, honestly, because maybe they're dealing with some fatigue or they're dealing with some depression or they're dealing with insomnia or something like this. And they read, some Instagram post, some Instagram model says, hey, you should try this thing. Right. But a lot of times you do some measurement and their testosterone's fine. Right. From a physiological point of view, the hormones are in great shape. Right. So that might not be the right avenue. We might be bypassing. We might be using some type of physiological bypass by going that route instead of maybe looking at these other things. Let's look at adrenal function. Let's look at micronutrient status. Right. Let's look at depth and quality of sleep. There's all these other things that we can look at. But, a lot of times we're just scrolling through social media and we're just, man, I'm not feeling so good. I'm not feeling 100%. And this thing looks like the thing that can solve my problem because it's been marketed to me a very specific way. I'm their target audience. And I'm going to do this thing. So yeah, instead of just jumping and it just becomes this thing where we're like compiling our protocols haphazardly. And for me, I think that's on one hand, having a haphazard protocol, whether it's for physical fitness or for longevity or business planning, whatever it is, it can be benign where it just doesn't really have much of an effect, or it can actually really hurt us both in the short term and the long term. Right. So get a solid baseline, right? Understand what are some of the genetic effects happening that are influencing these genetic influences that are affecting us right now. And what are some of the things that could be affecting us in 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right? Get a full blood work panel, right? Full, like way deeper than what most primary care doctors go, and dive in, look in. And so you can use this as some predictive value to see what are things that we're dealing with now? How can we optimize now? But what are some things that we could be dealing with in the next 20, 30, 40 years?
Would you take the same philosophy about when you're looking at careers?
Absolutely.
So you would do your assessment, right? personal inventory on your career, for example, what would that look like?
Yeah. So one is I've got a client that I'm working with right now. He's trying to make a career transition. And he's making a ton of money in his business as it is, but it's not really fulfilling. It takes a ton of time and energy, and he's trying to figure out how does he transition to something else. The first thing is assessing, okay, well, what are the positive aspects of the job that you're doing right now? What are the things that you absolutely love? What are the things in your current career that are essentially deal breakers, right? So now you set your parameters. Now, as we're going to construct your new career, how do we find what's happening within the middle? Because that's where the juice is. And then being able to actually create a plan and figure out. So you've done your assessment, you know what your deal breakers are, you know what's not working, you know what's working. You made your assessment, and then now we're going to create a strategy. And that strategy is like, how long do you think it's going to feasibly take for you to make the first transition, and then the next transition, and the next transition? Do you need to continue on with your career path right now and allocate an extra 5 hours or 10 hours per week? Create a strategy, create a plan, and you put it into action. And if the thing's not working, then you actually have something you can manipulate. You've got dials you can move up and dials you can move down, instead of just haphazardly being like, fuck this job, I'm out of here. This, my boss sucks. This business that I've spent 20 years creating, it sucks. I'm just going to destroy it, either through selling prematurely or making decisions that will sabotage the success of the business. That happens. Instead, it's like, hey, stop for a moment, just pause, take a fucking breath, eat a sandwich, chill for a moment. Like, what's not working here? What is working here? Let's do a stress inventory. I love doing this with my guys all the time. Let's do a stress inventory, right? Let's write down a comprehensive list of all the things in your life that suck right now, that are creating stress, things you're thinking about a lot, things that are creating emotional or mental friction, things that are distracting your attention from being able to be 100% present in what you're doing right now. What are those things? Total list. Separate them out. What are the things that you are within your control, and what are the things that are outside of your control? Right? We'll set that stuff that's outside of your control. We'll deal with that in a moment. Now, let's take everything that's within your control. Let's prioritize and execute, right? Let's figure out what is the most important thing that if we get this thing done, it makes everything else a little bit easier. And then move further up the list. Be strategic, right? You're doing that creates a little bit less mental friction. You're not freaking out as much because we're taking action, right? We're action-oriented individuals. And then, okay, what are we going to do about the stuff that we don't have control over? Right? This is where the mindfulness piece comes in, right? This is where the loving kindness meditation comes in, right? This is where the resilience training, being able to physiologically deal with the stressful impulses, right? High intensity interval training, ice exposure, cold exposure, heat exposure, right? Like learning how to tune your physiological organism in the same way that you would tune an instrument. Like if you think about it, if your body is a physiological organism, like a guitar or like a flute, right? The energy moving through the instrument is just energy. It's not negative. It's not positive. It's just energy. And if I can tune myself just right, then I'm going to create some beautiful sounds. I can create some beautiful music, right? Stress is just energy, right? Anxiety is just energy. When we look at it from the physiological point of view, what is it doing? It's changing our brain and saying, hey, you're ready for something. Let's act. But if you're laying in your bed spinning out about this bad investment that you did, you can't take action right there, right? So then that's where like the resilience training that you get your guys to go do, Josh, like the cold exposure, stuff like that, those are different ways to tune, right? Breath holds, things like that. Your body's starting to panic. You're like, hey, it's all right. Right? It's okay. I'll breathe in a moment. 10 more seconds, I'll breathe. I'll get out of this ice bath in 20 more seconds. It's cool. I'm safe. Everything's good.
So if I'm hearing you, you fine tune the body to stress so that you can manage external stress better. That's a big part of that.
Well, and also internal stress, the mental stress.
And then I'm also hearing a big part of it is really going from adolescent, essentially psychology, which is give it to me now, including either start a new project now, get a quick fix now, or abandon things now, to taking a step back, allowing more space, if I'm hearing you correctly, to strategically build a strategy or a plan around what's happening, which is really adult behavior, right? Adult behavior is, let me sit back, let me look at all the things, let me get proper insight and actually build a strategic plan, versus adolescent is, react, highly reactive.
Well, I mean, that's what I do from the health perspective with all my clients is we reverse engineer what I call the marginal decade. We assume, okay, you're going to live to 85 or 90, right? Let's just assume that. I mean, who knows how long you're going to live? We can't really project that far in the future, but let's assume 85 to 90. What does that last 10 years of your life look like? Specifically, what are you wanting to do? How do you want your body to feel? Who are you spending time with? How are you spending your time? Right? All those things. Get really, really, really specific about that. And then we use that to reverse engineer what we're going to start with today. Right? So then if we take how you want to be in the future and we marry that with your genetics, and if we marry that with your blood work, so now we've got a baseline, man, now we've got a lot of data to work with. Now you as my client can ask me, okay, Joshua, what is the number one thing I need to focus on? And we just make it really simple, right? We're going to focus on this one thing, right? Based on your data, based on your goals for the future, what you need in the present, what your body is physiologically needing, and what your genetics are saying, right? All this information is feeding this one effort. And then we move on to the next effort and then the next effort. So that way, in the course of 6 months or a year, now you've got a program that you've been working on and you've tuned up so many different aspects of your life from a physiological point of view, from a psychological, emotional, across the board.
Makes sense. It's the same thing you do with like financial freedom, essentially, right? You want to, how much you want to retire with, what's the back end plan to start to invest towards that now? How are you investing? How are you saving, right? How do you build a strategy now for where you want that to be in the future? So you're doing it from more of a physiological place so that you're building the foundation or the somatic body or the health and vitality now towards that. Because I know when you did it with me, you were looking at like, hey, you have diabetes in your chart potentially, or you have these potential things to look for. So how do we plan for that now so that you're not experiencing these things in the next 5-10 years?
That's right. You know, first principles apply in almost all situations. And one of the things that we've done in the West is we've learned the technology of building wealth. Why not use the same wealth building strategies for finance to increase our own personal wealth, our wealth and well-being, our health? Same principles apply. What are things that we can do to create compounding interest? Right? Those are always the questions that I'm asking. High intensity interval training, if you do it the right way, compounding interest, right? Stretching your joints out a couple times a week, compounding interest. Eating certain types of foods and avoiding other types of foods 80% of the time.
So those are two really good actionable strategies. One, I'm hearing you say stretching. Two, high interval training. Is it specific types of high intensity interval training?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what a person's goals are, but I really like this Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. I think that also applies to a lot of different things. We know that if you want to be 85 years old and you want to be able to walk 5 to 10 miles up and down varied terrain, hills with a little bit of a load on your back, and you're able to, you don't feel like you're going to be dying of heat exhaustion, you need to be operating within the top 10% of VO2 max, right? Which is the ability for your body to extract the maximum amount of oxygen from your lungs and be able to distribute it throughout your body, right? We have to be operating within the top 10% for our age group, right? For me right now, I'm not near top 10% for people who are 46 years old, right? But I'm within the top 15%. The ways to do that is you build an aerobic base. For the 80% of your effort, of your time each week or each month, however you're measuring it, is spent in a zone 2, which is a moderate intensity training, right? So essentially, if you guys want to take notes, how you calculate your zone 2, if you're going to use a heart rate monitor, whether it's organic to the machine or if it's something that's attached to your body, you basically take 180 and you minus your age. And that will get you to a benchmark. So for me, 180 minus my age, which is 46, it gets me about 134. So 135 is going to be my zone 2, right? So then plus or minus 5, 130 to 140 is going to be where I'm at. So I'll spend about 150 minutes a week, right? So basically 30 minutes a day, 5 days per week, working in my zone 2, right? It's not a lot of effort, doesn't take too much time. But then 2 or 3 days a week, then I'll do the high intensity interval training. And the high intensity interval training is there's a lot of different ways to do it, but essentially you want to go maximum effort, right? We're talking about 90% of your maximum heart rate. And another calculation you can use for calculating max heart rate is 220 minus your age. So you want to get about 90% of your maximum heart rate, and you want to be able to maintain it from anywhere. And it's a wide parameter, 30 seconds to 4 minutes, depending on what your goals are, right? If you're just going for general fitness, I would say do interval training of 1 minute on at 80 to 90% of your maximum heart rate and 2 minutes off, and do that for 5 rounds. And if you do that 3 times per week, now you've hit within that. Now 80% of your aerobic effort is spent in your zone 2, and 20% of your aerobic effort is spent doing high intensity interval training. If you're like, hey, I want more, you dial it up. But if you're going to dial up your high intensity interval training, you also got to dial up your zone 2. And then what's going to happen is you're going to create a massive spike in your VO2 max.
What I love about this is the other day I was seeing, it must have been a couple in their, late 80s, and really having trouble walking. So I'm tracking what you're saying of like, hey, are we thinking about where we're going and what are we doing now for them? Which when I was saying adults focus more on the future and make sacrifices now for the future. Whereas essentially children want whatever they can fill their plate with now, right? That's more the adolescent. So the adult is saying, hey, when I'm 80, 90, I got a lot of energy. I'm walking around, I'm traveling, I'm enjoying life. So I'm going to do the work now and invest now in training my body so that I have the oxygen level. It sounds like that's the major key. It's oxygen and also the body, because it breaks down. We actually have to move it more, not less, as we get older.
That's right.
So
yeah. Well, and it's not just oxygen, it's metabolic effects, right? Because we're working against, there are a couple of things that are working against us, regardless of where we are on the spectrum of cholesterol, triglycerides, and things like that. If we're a man in the United States, and if we don't die of cancer, we're probably going to die of cardiovascular disease. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And what is our life feeling and looking like up to that devastating event? So there's a couple of things that are creating some friction for us. And that's the deposition, we'll just say atherosclerosis, right? The hardening of the arteries. In order for your body to respond to any type of stress, whether it's hot stress, cold stress, exercise stress, or emotional stress, the vascular system needs to be able to respond. It needs to be able to dilate when necessary and constrict when necessary. If we lose the elasticity of our blood vessels, that is one aspect of our fitness that is going to be detrimental. It's going to hurt us. And then the other piece of friction that we're working against is that our insulin, which is one of the hormones that removes sugar from our blood and puts it into our cells to be used as energy, our body, regardless of whether or not we are insulin resistant, we are all developing certain degrees of insulin resistance as we age. Right? You can think of insulin resistance as metabolic resistance or energy resistance. It's not just a matter of getting the blood out or the sugar out of our blood. It's a matter of getting the energy into our cells. That's the thing that insulin does. So as we become more and more insulin resistant, we're losing the ability to manufacture energy, what the manufacturer is within the cell. So when we're doing this aerobic training, the combination of zone 2 and high intensity interval training, what we're doing is we're giving ourselves a boost. We're increasing the elasticity of our blood vessels, and we're helping to increase our insulin sensitivity.
Compound interest.
We're also mobilizing the fat from around our internal organs, because if I accumulate fat around my internal organs, they're going to send these inflammatory signals, right? What they're called inflammatory cytokines. And they're going to actually interact with the cells of my body. And if I have fat accumulated around my internal organs, it's going to actually tell my body to produce less insulin and to be less sensitive to my insulin. So that you can see how a cycle, accumulation of fat around internal organs makes us insulin resistant, which makes us accumulate more fat around our internal organs, which makes us more insulin resistant. And it's a whole cycle. So how do we break that cycle? Increase our VO2 max. Let's focus on aerobic training.
Hey, we thank you for listening to the Wenner Folsom podcast. Just a couple quick notes. First, if you are a man and you're looking for an honorable and inspiring group of men to hold you accountable and challenge you to grow in your relationships, your fitness, your career, your finances, and your life, go to www.k4men.com. And if you are a veteran, first responder, or man or woman who deals with trauma, and you are looking for some resiliency tools and skills for you, your team, your organization, go to valorresiliency.com. Hope to see you there. Back to the podcast.
I got a question about application and consistency around all these things, because I think we're at the state societally where, as profound as this is, like, this information is available. If you're a contemporary, relevant, let's say, man, although there's women watching, there's pretty much, we know what we should be doing and not doing and eating and not eating. And like, that information's there. Mm-hmm. I think people are having a hard time implementing, integrating, and then having it be consistent.
That's right.
What is your strategy for doing that yourself or with your clients?
Yeah, so I'll talk about myself first, because that's where everything starts. One is I have a plan that's based on goals. So that way, if I'm going to do something hard, but I don't know exactly why I'm doing it, and if I don't have a strategy, and if I don't have a way to turn the levers up and down, then I'll probably abandon that strategy after a little while, right? Yeah. So one is having a meaningful goal that you're working toward. And that's one of the reasons why with my guys, obviously I've done this with myself. If I'm looking at my cardiovascular biomarkers and I'm looking at my DNA and I'm thinking about my family history and I'm saying there's a high likelihood that I'm probably going to have at least one heart attack by the time I'm 65 years old and potentially a stroke by the time I'm 65 years old. For me, that's a big enough motivator. right? Because I've got a young man who I raised, and for me, life is getting way better as I get older. It just is, right? Way better.
Facts.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I don't know what's the next year holds, right? So that's another thing. I've got this curiosity that just drives me. So I've got a little bit of internal motivation to do it. And so I have a why, I have a how. And then on those days where I just don't feel like doing the thing, I've already created a subroutine. I've created a rule in my head. It's just trust the process. Trust the plan. If I realize that after like 2 weeks, I'm not going to the gym, there's a certain thing that's within my plan that I'm just not meeting, a certain goal that I'm just not meeting, then I'll reassess or reevaluate the plan and scale it down or scale it up as necessary. But I think that one of the main reasons why people fall off is they don't really have a program. They don't have a plan based on your goals and based on your physiological needs. It's customized to you. I think that's the main reason why a lot of guys, at least for me, that's one of the main reasons why I won't continue on with something. But I've also created a subroutine, which is I take motivation out of the process. It's just not even a factor. Motivation is no longer a factor for me, right? The feeling of like, I wake up at 6 a.m. I don't feel like going to the gym. I don't care. I'm going to go anyways. I take motivation out of the equation. And it's taken me a little while to do that. But now that it's there, I don't use motivation as an excuse to not do something. Because I'm like, well, motivation's not a factor. It's no factor.
How'd you do it?
Incrementally over time, right? Just showing to myself like, hey, I don't feel like going to the gym, but what if I just went downstairs and put my shoes on? Well, shit, now I got my shoes on. Might as well grab my keys. I got my keys. I'm in my car. I might as well go to the gym. I'm at the gym. I might as well work. And if I'm going to work, like I'm 5 minutes into my warm up, I might as well push. I'm going to push to the best of my ability that day. Right?
So what you're saying about all this is completely makes sense to me, but I got that from somewhere and you did too.
Yeah.
You're rare. You're saying that just, and there's a bunch of guys watching right now, a bunch of K4 men who are watching this going, fuck, like I know this, but I'm not doing it because it's so much easier to do something else than those simple steps. So somehow that you are drawing from a pre-existing operating system. Is that military? Was that sports?
Yeah. I mean, growing up, my dad was pretty strict and he'd always have these little catchphrases like life isn't a fashion show, just fucking show up and do the work. You know, that you just, yeah, he'd kind of goad me on like, I don't want to roll up the extension cord. It doesn't matter what you want to do it or whether you want to do it or not, just do the thing. Because otherwise you're just going to be sitting there staring at it and it's going to be staring back at you. And, it's going to create this, cognitive drain. Right. So yeah, I think that part of it was military. I spent a lot of time as a young person studying martial arts. So I think that, that could be that. But I was a fucking knucklehead too. I was got in a lot of trouble. I spent 2 years in a boarding school, California Youth Authority. Basically, I had a conversation with my probation officer and my parents and said, you got to get this kid out of here. Otherwise, he's going to be bad news for himself and everyone else involved. Right. So I think a lot of it is just like falling down a lot. I got a lot of scars, bounced down the mountain a couple of times and, brushed myself off and just been like, fuck, I guess it's time to start climbing again.
Right.
I can do it a little smarter this time.
Yeah. And for all the rest of the men too, so they can avoid that little side quest, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I would say the other thing is I've got a lot of support. I've got a lot of guys, Josh knows a lot of my friends. Yeah. He came to one of a gathering. What was that, like 5-6 years ago? Yeah.
Or longer. Yeah, it was a while ago.
It was a while ago. Yeah, unfortunately, I've got a lot of really good guy friends that we hold each other accountable. We do stupid shit together, but we hold each other accountable. And I want to say, Josh was at this event, even though there was a couple people that were leading the event, everyone there in their own right was a total alpha. And that makes me beg the question, what does it mean to be an alpha male? And I think about it like this. From a neurological point of view, we've got different brain waves that are happening: beta waves, delta waves, gamma waves, theta waves, alpha waves. Alpha is to be in the state of just kind of calm equanimity. So what does that mean to the people around us? It means that we're giving them permission to just be themselves, right? If I'm calm, relaxed, secure in my own space, I'm helping other people to feel that way as well, right? And I'm just kind of emanating the sense of safety and security. So if you ask me, okay, Joshua, how would you go about helping someone to do something hard, even if they don't want to do it? The resistance a lot of times that we feel is going to be internal and it's going to be emotional and it's going to be this feeling that we're not safe to do it. Well, what if I just contradicted that feeling or that state? You're not safe to wake up early. You're not safe to go into the ice bath. You're not safe to have that hard conversation with your man or your woman. And what if I just breathed into it and reminded myself, do you know what? You're safe. You're safe. And then I could do that to the people around me. Hey, guess what? You're safe. We're all safe. We're all in this together. We're all operating. We're doing the best job that we possibly can.
Hey, the one of the things that you're alluding to is the importance of tactically accountability is very important, but also strategically to surround yourself with either like-minded or shared goal people.
Yeah.
There is almost an honor code of showing up to do things that you would not be willing to do for yourself for the sake of others. And how much of you being a public person and a professional coach drives you to maintain your strict protocol?
Yeah, well, that's a two-edged sword because sometimes I can get a bit neurotic about it.
100%.
And, because, again, like the mantra that I gave my guy, which is your net worth is not your self-worth. A lot of times my self-worth has been derived by my clinical professionalism or my clinical success, right? Mm-hmm. So before I started coaching guys, before that, I was in pain management for 15 years. And then along with that was also drug and alcohol addiction. So I was the executive director for a drug and alcohol treatment center and created drug and alcohol treatment programs. And that dovetailed into chronic pain because the two of them, along with PTSD and adverse childhood events and all of that, just kind of like, it's all related, right? And a lot of times my career success would be driven by my desire for an amplified sense of self-worth. Mm-hmm. To my detriment, that I'd often sometimes put myself in really compromising situations and push myself way harder than I actually needed to do it. So the same thing happens often as a coach, where I'm sometimes, because I have this image of myself as this, whatever, and I do something that's outside of my integrity and I can just beat myself up. And, I love to say that a little shame goes a long way, and little shame is good, but keeping that going, it's too heavy of a tool
You're the first person in this pop culture sphere who has acknowledged that shame is a actual functional evolutionary tool. Like there is a function for it. Yeah. And I think so often we dismiss that as just being universally negative, but it exists for a reason. And it's behavior management within the context of interpersonal relationships. Like it's a tribal behavior mechanism.
Yeah. Shame, guilt, anger, aggression,
resentment.
Resentment.
Yeah. Sorry. Or regret. Regret's very valuable. People want to say no regrets. I'm like, no, regret is a function. It's an uncomfortable feeling that you have when you've done stuff you shouldn't have done or didn't do that you should have done.
Yeah.
It's a useful tool.
Totally. Well, and I think that one of the technologies that I learned from the military, which I thought was great, we would do an objective after action review after every mission, right? Critical. Absolutely critical. In fact, the after action review a lot of times was more important than the actual training itself. Because we're teaching ourselves how to evaluate and reevaluate our situation. We're trying to do it as objectively as possible. But of course, with that, people are going to feel shame. They're going to feel guilt. They're going to feel a sense of pride. There's going to be a bunch of egotism. There's going to be a bunch of all that stuff is there within the laboratory of this contained unit. This is, when I get together with a couple of my guy friends, a lot of times we're doing just after action reviews for life, right? Like this is how it went down with my lady. And punched a hole in the wall, right? Now let's debrief this.
Yeah. Left a bang. Left a punch.
Yeah, exactly.
I think just to piggyback off of this, I think there's a powerful conversation around focus and learning, because part of what we're talking about is, hey, how do you keep putting structure and systems in place to live your life, which is going to require some more force, let's call it, and more stress in some areas. But then we're also saying, hey, if you keep living too much stress, you're going to burn out. So there's these conversations, I think the intersect is really focus and learning how to get into the balance of flow state. And so I know you do a big focus on that too. Anything you want to share around that? Because it feels like that's really learning how to hit the sweet spot of flow state, is that balance of just enough stress so you're not over the edge and also not enough complacency where you're bored, right? It's that line in between.
Again, this comes back down to having an after action review, being able to do that within our own lives. Because if I'm overreaching, while I'm in the process of overreaching, because I'm being driven, right? Sometimes I'll get into this manic state where I'm just driving. It feels fucking good. I don't want to stop. I'm not going to stop working. I'm not going to stop to evaluate whether or not I should continue to push. I should keep on doing these 12, 14-hour days. I'm not going to stop until something makes me stop, until my physiology starts to put the brake on. And then during that process, if I can either choose, I can keep on hitting more coffee or other types of stimulants and just kind of try to push through it. Or I can pay attention to those little signs and symptoms in the beginning. Right? Like, am I a little bit more agitated when I'm dealing with the people in my life? Right? Are the little things in my life, do I notice myself saying fuck more? Right? Like, fuck, there's this little thing. Fuck, there's this little thing. Right?
Yeah. That's one of my markers. Like, as soon as I start dropping F-bombs around people, I am off the reservation.
Right? Totally.
Yeah, it's one of my
And so if I'm paying attention to that, I'm like, hey, okay, after action review, what's happening? Right? Maybe I need to dial back here. Maybe I need to prioritize sleep. Maybe I need to push less hard in the gym and maybe take more walks through the beautiful hills around my house. Because when we're talking about things like flow and high performance and focus, again, high performance, at least for me, depends on the foundation that we've got set, right? If I'm constantly destabilizing my foundation, then I'm not going to be able to get into high states of focus, because a high state of focus requires the ability to pay attention as present as we possibly can. Right. So when you see, I love watching Formula One, and I'm seeing these, they're basically jet fighter pilots, like on the ground, inches away from each other's tail. Like, how do they get into that situation? They're able to drop into a place of heightened state of mental awareness and attention. And as soon as their attention deviates a little bit, they lose their flow.
There's a distinction between the word concentration, which is to add, and then focus, which is subtractive.
Yeah,
it's singular.
Yeah.
And so the F1 guys, they subtract everything.
That's right.
Except for what they're doing. In fact, whenever like they're on the radio talking about another driver or something, that's very few drivers can do that.
Yeah.
Can actually open the aperture and concentrate on the race as a whole, as opposed to focusing on their car and that corner.
That's right.
I think there is a time, I think there's almost a toggle. There are times to open the aperture, and that's the after action time. It's the time when we're actually going, all right, now I need to broaden the perspective and actually go hunting. And then I need to shut it and go killing. Hunt, kill, hunt, kill. And that's a metaphor that I'm kind of playing with my life too, because I'm a killer most of the time. And a lot of times I realize there was so many other things that I could have been going after that were probably smarter and more sustainable and more fulfilling. And this is the loop of conversation, that you started with, which is, what are your actual targets? Are they based on some old operating system, that from my earlier inadequacy that I'm trying to make up for? Mm-hmm. Or is it really what I want to be doing now?
Yeah. And all that comes clear within the after action review. Why did this thing happen? Oh, I was running a program again. It might be a little bit different because I've done some work, but it's still very similar to the program that I've been running for most of my life. Right. So what are some things that I can do? Okay, I'm going to become more aware of, like, what are the sensations in my body? Because our body is an amazing mechanism for helping us to identify what's happening internally within our minds. Right. And I think that to try to be overly sensitive to our body can be really detrimental, because then we develop this neurosis and that, we're constantly fixated on like the sensations in our body. But I think there's a certain degree of sensitivity that's necessary. And if we can pay attention, I think about it as apprehending, right? If I can apprehend a signal, a sensation throughout my body, and I'm like, oh, I like, for me, it's like a tension, like right around along here, and it will start to creep over my ears, and it starts to turn into a headache. When I start to feel that back here, it makes me stop and ask myself, okay, what's happening? Oh, I'm running a program. Okay, what do I need to do to not run that program? Well, maybe I can't shut the program down right now. Maybe it's doing its own thing. But what I can do is I can breathe, or I can go to the gym, or I can call a buddy, or I can go for a walk. I can do something to change my physiological state. And while that's happening, I can be aware of what's happening within my mind. I can just let the cycle play itself out. Right. Because sometimes like a bucking horse. It's just like, oh man, this thing is just going to happen. Right. It's like that scene from Christmas Vacation with the dog. And it's like, once that dog gets a hold of your leg and starts humping, you might as well just let it do its thing. Like the same thing, like sometimes like these internal programs, once they start going, but it's like, how can I get myself to a safe space so that way this program can run itself out and I'm not going to make a bunch of stupid decisions and destroy my life, right? Like, is it good for me to be running this program in a bar? Or maybe I should not be in a bar while I'm running this program. Maybe I should call a buddy and go for a hike. You know what I mean?
Josh and I refer to those as like the warning lights on the dash. Totally. Like for you, would you get this in like the boop, there's a light that goes on. Those are emotions and trauma signs and old programs. Like, they should be setting off lights.
That's right.
And I think most men are unfamiliar with the lights and what they mean, and then how to address them. Most of us looked at actually what our dashboard looks like. It's just filled with lights.
Yeah. But we just keep on hitting Control Alt Delete and turning those lights off.
Yeah.
Bypass. As we start to wind down, a couple of things. One, we like to do a challenge. So anybody listening can actually like take this and do something with it, actionable challenge. So one, what would be a challenge to give anybody listening right now that can take what they've done and just make some progress in their life, take some action from this?
I love the stress test. The stress test list.
That's a great idea.
Good. But anything of that was awesome.
I'm
doing that.
Like the stress inventory?
Yeah.
Yeah, take that technology away. But I would say that here's my challenge to all you guys. Envision what your life is going to be like 10 years before you die. Spend some time with it. Go for a walk, think about it. You can even talk to people. You can talk to your parents. You can look around at the people around you who are 85, 75, 85 years old. Look for people who are good examples of what you want to be like. Like I know there's this guy, like I like to climb Mount Shasta, which is close to my house, and then ski down it. And there's a guy, he's in his like mid 70s. I'm sucking wind and this guy's whistling. And he's like, we're going at basically the same pace. And I'm thinking, okay, this guy, I want to be like this guy when I'm in my mid 70s. So think about examples of people that you want to be like as you age, but also think about examples of people you don't want to be like when you age. In that last 10 years of your life, be very concise, be very specific. How do you want to live for that last 10 years? And then use that as a way to inform whatever strategies or whatever efforts you're going to put into your fitness plan, your financial plan, whatever it is, like reverse engineer from there. So I'd say that's the big kind of like overarching challenge, because that can provide us so much information.
It's not just the cardio to get up Mount Shasta. It's the money and the woman who will let you, and every other part of your life that enables that amazing trip.
Yeah, the time. Yeah, I mean, I just spent 3 weeks in Bali surfing. A month before that, I was in Japan skiing, and it's just like, because 5 years ago, I was like, well, how do I want to be living? And slowly, incrementally started putting my life together in such a way, again, falling down the mountain, pick myself back up and figuring it out. And then finally, like, this is how I want to live. Great, cool. I'm on the trajectory towards where I want to be in my 70s and 80s, because I still want to be going to Japan skiing, still want to be going to Bali surfing. I still want to be doing all these things.
So good. So, hey, Josh, how could people get a hold of you? If they like what you said, how could they find you? How could they find out what you're doing? What would that look like?
So I've got a website, joshgraner.com. You can find me on Instagram I think it's Josh Graner Health. That's my handle. And then also, I don't know if you've got show notes, but you could even I don't mind you sharing my email address.
Just share it for the guys, and we'll add all this to the show notes.
Yeah, totally.
And do you want to just say it out loud so we can actually just add it in after?
Yeah, totally. ALL1mind@gmail.com. Yeah, so I'll write that in the show note and here on the chat.
Awesome. Really cool. Hey, really appreciate you being on. Super valuable. Lots of actionable strategies and takeaways from this. Really appreciate you jumping on, Joshua. And for everybody listening, stay battle tested.
Yeah, right on. Cool. Thanks, guys.